Before you judge me, let me explain how I ended up here on my 62nd birthday. I thought I was going out for a simple lunch. I wore my nicest sweater, even styled my hair. But instead of cake and laughter, I was handed a suitcase and left behind. That moment was only the beginning because sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who share your last name. Stay with me till the end. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. They say a mother's love is unconditional, patient, forgiving, eternal. I believed that with my whole heart. I lived it. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night. Every school play I was there for Brandon, my only son. That morning, I woke up with a flutter in my chest. The kind of anticipation that makes you feel young again, 62 years old, alone in my small house in Dayton, Ohio, but hopeful. Brandon hadn't called much lately. He always said work was crazy, and things with his wife were tense. But still, I believed he'd show up today. I made pancakes, his favorite. I even set to plates. By noon, I was still alone, my heart dipped. But I pushed the feeling away. I checked my phone over and over, reread old texts just to feel close to him. Then, at 1 p.m., the doorbell rang. Brandon stood there, flashing that boyish grin he used to wear whenever he wanted something. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, holding a small bouquet from the grocery store. I smiled through the sting in my chest and hugged him tight. "You came, of course," he said, patting my back stiffly. "Get dressed. I made lunch reservations." I didn't question a thing. I grabbed my coat, my little purse, and those pinching shoes that always looked better than they felt. I was giddy, almost like a teenager headed to prom. But we didn't drive toward the city. No restaurant in sight. Instead, we pulled into a long driveway lined with maple trees glowing in ash gold and red. My stomach turned when I looked up at the sign, Willow Pine Senior Living Facility, Brandon. "What is this?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk. It's not safe anymore. You live alone with your memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I snapped. He kept going. "I found a great place. Safe, comfortable. You'll have people your age, activities." I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that didn't feel like laughing at all. "You brought me here on my birthday?" He got out of the car. "Let's go inside." I refused to move. That's when he popped open the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. I froze. "You went through my things," he sighed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Inside, it felt like time stopped. Smiling faces at reception, the faint smell of antiseptic mixed with overcooked vegetables. Brandon handed over legal papers, power of attorney, my name, his signature, just like that. Done. I didn't cry, not then. I let them lead me to a beige-walled room with an adjustable bed and a window facing nothing but brick, my birthday gift. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my coat, the cold seeping straight into my bones. No cake, no candles, just silence. Hours later, I finally opened the bouquet. The flowers had wilted from the ride. They looked the way I felt. That night, I lay awake. Nurses' footsteps echoed in the hallway. A TV murmured in the distance. The mattress was too firm. The sheets smelled like bleach. I replayed every conversation with Brandon from the past year, searching for the signs I'd missed. All the times I said yes when I should have said no, the money I loaned, the excuses I made, the disappointments I swallowed because I loved him. That night, something inside me snapped. I stopped defending him. A crack formed deep within me. And once it broke, there was no going back. The next morning, I asked a nurse for my cell phone. She gave me a pitying smile and said, "Your son already took care of that." Disabled the line. Said it was too confusing for you. That's when I realized I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. And if I didn't find a way out, they'd succeed. But I'm not as fragile as they think. Not even close. For today's, I barely ate, not to make a statement, but because I simply couldn't stomach the food or the truth. There's something about being treated like you're useless that breaks a part of you that never fully heals. I'd raised a child, built a home, loved with everything I had. And now, I was reduced to a room number and a patient chart. The nurses were kind. But kindness can feel like pity when you're trapped. They called me sweetheart and hung like I was either 10 years old or 100. No one asked what I had done before. No one asked what I loved. To them, I was just another old woman in slippers, supposedly forgetting things even though I hadn't forgotten a damn thing. My roommate, Doris, slept all day and snored all night. When she did talk, it was about family who hadn't visited in years. I listened. Because I knew that ache of absence too well. I tried to keep my mind sharp. Watched the news in the common room. Did the crossword puzzles they left in the hallway. Reread a novel I'd already read twice. But still, something inside me was sinking deeper, darker. Then, on the fourth day, everything changed. That's when I met Ruby. She wasn't even supposed to be there. A nurse had called in sick, and Ruby filled in, young, with braids tucked under her scrub cap and kindness in her eyes. She checked my vitals, then leaned closer. You don't belong here, she whispered. I looked at her. Startled. Don't get me wrong, she said softly. A lot of folks need help, and that's okay. But you don't seem lost, her. Words hit me so hard, I had to blink away the sting in my eyes. We talked about Brandon. About the betrayal. I told her what I could without falling apart, and she actually listened, really listened. Later that day, she came back with something in her hand. This belonged to Mr. Henley, a resident who passed last week, she said quietly. We found it tucked inside his Bible. Nobody claimed it. It was a lottery ticket. Folded, a little yellowed, dated just 2 weeks earlier. I let out a brittle chuckle. And you want me to try my luck? Ruby winked. Hey, the world owes you something. At first I didn't plan to use it. It felt silly, but boredom and desperation are strange companions. That night, I waited until the hallways were quiet, sat at one of the facility's ancient desktop computers in the lounge and typed in the numbers. My hand froze. My eyes scanned the screen again and again. $60 million. I covered my mouth, staring around the empty room. The silence roared in my ears. It wasn't joy I felt, it was fear, pure electric fear. If Brandon found out, if anyone found out, I printed the confirmation, folded it tight, and tucked it into my bra. The next day, I pulled Ruby aside. I need to talk to someone privately, someone legal. She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Ruby knew a volunteer attorney, Aaron. He came by twice a month to help seniors with wills and paperwork. When he arrived that Friday, I waited with my heart pounding until we found a corner in the tiny break room. I slid him the lottery confirmation and whispered, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows rose, but he didn't flinch. "We'll need to move fast," he said. The next hours blurred together. Paperwork, notarizations, financial transfers, a new phone, a temporary mailing address. Aaron contacted an independent financial advisor who set up a blind trust. My name never appeared anywhere. Brandon would never see a cent. I signed a new will, leaving everything to charity but not yet disclosed. Brandon had already signed away my life once. I wouldn't let him do it again. The night I left, Ruby hugged me tight. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Just before dawn, I slipped away, wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a duffel bag with only the essentials. They thought I was senile, broken, alone, but I was about to become a ghost with $60 million. Let them look for me. They'd never see me coming. The bus ride out of Ohio was long, cold, and quiet. I sat near the back, hood up, sunglasses on, clutching that duffel like it held my soul. In many ways, it did. I didn't know exactly where I was going, only that I needed to be far enough away that no one could find me. Not Brandon, not his wife, not the lawyers he'd already called. Aaron helped me buy a modest house in rural Tennessee under the new trust. Off the grid, but livable. No cameras, no nosy neighbors, just enough distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. When we crossed the Kentucky border, I finally exhaled for the first time in hours. Freedom had a taste, not sweet but metallic, like blood, like fear. The house was nothing special. A one-story brick with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox. But it had a working heater, clean water, and most importantly, silence. Not the hollow silence of a nursing home where people give up on living. This was the kind of silence that lets you breathe. Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized they've been lying to you your entire life? That's where my story begins. The next few days, I moved like a shadow. I cooked simple meals, checked the mailbox, sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, and watched the wind carry dead leaves across the yard. I couldn't stop checking the news, half expecting to see my name in bold headlines. Missing woman wins $1 million. Son claims mental instability, but there was nothing, not yet. I kept the lottery ticket locked away in a fireproof box beneath the floorboards in the hallway closet. Inside with it, my new will, a burner phone, and a letter addressed to whoever might find it, just in case. Then, about a week after I left Willow Pines, the silence shattered. A knock at the door. I froze. Nobody knew where I was. I hadn't used a credit card, hadn't spoken to anyone. My heart pounded like a war drum as I tiptoed to the window and peeked through the curtain. Just a delivery man, groceries, part of the quiet arrangement Aaron had set up. Still, something inside me whispered that I wasn't as hidden as I thought. That afternoon, curiosity won. I created a fake Facebook account and searched for Brandon. And there he was, smiling in his profile picture as if the world hadn't crumbled. His latest post read, "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police. She's been missing for several days. We're worried about her safety." Hundreds of comments poured in, prayers, sympathy. Strangers praising Brandon as a devoted son. I laughed so hard, tears streamed down my face though. If only they knew, but it wasn't the post that broke me, it was the Picture he used, not recent. It was from 5 years ago, one of the last birthdays we spent together. I had a sparkly party hat on, his arm was around me, we looked happy. How easy it is to fake love in pictures. That night, I couldn't sleep, I sat in the living room, staring at the fireplace, my thoughts growing darker the longer I let them spin. I remembered every loan, every lie, every time Brandon gaslight me. You told me that already, he'd say when I hadn't, or you're forgetting more these days, and I believed him. I thought I was slipping, I thought it was me, but it wasn single quotes it was him. He wanted me to doubt myself so that when he finally took control of my life, I wouldn't resist. Well, those days were over. The next morning, I called Aaron from the burner phone. I need you to update my will again, I said. What changes? He asked. Make it clear, Brandon Taylor gets nothing, not a dollar, not a keepsake. Not even a memory. Done, he replied. You're safe now, Margaret. But I wasn't, not yet, because deep down, I knew something was coming, and then it arrived. A plain envelope, no return address, hidden among utility bills and junk mail. I wouldn't have even noticed it if not for the paper, thicker, heavier, expensive. The second I touched it, my stomach sank. Inside, a photocopy of my signature. Below it, 2 more, one from my late husband, Richard, and one from Brandon, a loan document. Dated 12 years ago. The bank's logo was real. The notary stamp was real, but my signature? Forged. I sat on the worn sofa, the letter shaking in my hands. The handwriting was perfect down to the loop in the G of Margaret. But it was too perfect, to practice. Richard would never have hidden something like this. And Brandon, he never said a word. I pulled out the fireproof box, opened the old file Aaron had helped me compile, and there it was, 3 more documents, each with my forged signature. The realization slithered through me like ice. Brandon had been stealing from me, from Richard, for years. It explained everything: the sudden financial strain, Richard's quiet tension, the canceled vacations, the late night arguments I thought were about work. I had blamed aging, the market, bad luck, but it wasn't luck. It was Brandon. All along. This time, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and began digging. For 3 days straight, I pieced it together. Brandon had forged loan documents using both Richard's social security number and mine. The balances varied, some rolled into collections. Richard must have covered most before he died, taking the shame with him. But one account still active showed a ballooning balance that had defaulted just 3 months before I was dumped at Willow Pines. My hands trembled as the screen glowed in the dark Tennessee living room. This wasn't just betrayal, this was fraud, criminal. I called Aaron again. I have new information, I told him. Forged documents, loans, Brandon did it. I believe you, he said calmly. Do you want to press charges? Not yet, I whispered. Not because I doubted, no, those doubts were gone. But because I wanted Brandon to feel it first: the silence, the waiting, the fear, the wondering. If I knew, because I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. The truth was, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. I started gathering everything I could: old emails, every account tied to my name, every financial notice Brandon had once sent me. I even contacted the old bank and, with Aaron's help, drafted a legal request for records. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and what I uncovered made my blood run cold. Brandon had taken out a high-interest loan against the small catering business Richard and I started back in the 80s, the one we ran out of our garage in those early years. The LLC was still technically active, and Brandon used it to secure a line of credit signing Richard's name. 2 years after Richard had already died. That wasn't just immoral, that was federal fraud. I saved everything: encrypted files, backups, and printed copies stored in the fireproof box beneath the floorboards. I didn't know how much time I had. But one thing was certain: if Brandon suspected I had vanished with millions, he'd come looking. Have you ever looked at someone you loved your whole life and realized you never really knew them? That's what it felt like, scrolling through page after page of proof that my own son had been lying, stealing, and betraying me for years. The boy I once cradled in my arms had grown into a stranger. Worse, a dangerous one. By now, I'd confirmed it all. Brandon had forged my signature, lied to banks, manipulated Richard into covering for him, and done it all while wearing the mask of a devoted son. But the darkest truth came from a simple database search, something Aaron's access helped me uncover. Brandon Taylor currently under federal investigation for fraudulent tax filings, embezzlement, and identity misuse. That last one hit hardest. Hands shaking, I clicked the case file. Most of it was redacted, but the accusations were clear. Brandon had been creating false identities, inflating incomes, falsifying deductions, and funneling money through tax refunds. Some of the identities belonged to the deceased. Some were elderly, some were real people, including me. The IRS had flagged multiple fraudulent returns filed under my name for the past 3 years. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Had Brandon planned to steal from me all along? Was this why he shoved me into that facility, shut off my phone, cut me off from the world? It wasn't protection, it was containment. He wanted me silent, disoriented, out of the way. I pushed back from the desk, pacing the narrow living room, clutching my chest to steady the tremors. My own son had weaponized my identity, used my name as a shield for his crimes, and when the walls closed in, he planned to lock me away like I was nothing but a loose end, but he miscalculated. I wasn't a loose end anymore. I was the one holding the thread. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I documented everything. I printed copies, filed them in manila folders, labeled them by date. I even recorded audio notes, not because I feared forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be the last one heard if anything happened to me. Then I made my move. I mailed a full copy of the evidence anonymously to the Department of Justice. Not to make noise, not yet, but to plant a seed. If anything ever happened to me, they'd know exactly where to look. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brandon already knew. Cars started lingering outside my house longer than usual. Once, a man knocked, claiming he was conducting a neighborhood survey. I didn't answer. I just watched from behind the curtain, phone in hand, heart pounding. Every knock, every ring, every shadow. But this time, I didn't run. I called Aaron again. We need to finalize the trust, I told him, and the will, too. I want everything protected. He agreed, setting up layers of legal insulation under my new name. If Brandon ever tried to touch a cent, every court in the country would slam the door in his face. But paper and signatures couldn't protect me from the emotional weight that came late at night. That was when I'd remember Brandon as a boy, his laugh, his scraped knees, the way he'd fall asleep on my chest, the teenage years, the distance that grew, the silences that stretched too long. How had I missed it? Maybe that's the cruelest kind of betrayal, the slow motion kind you watch for years, always hoping you're wrong, always hoping it's something else. But now I knew. And I wasn't going to let him rewrite the ending to my story. Because for the first time in my life, I held the pen. The next letter arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, but the second I saw the handwriting, I knew. Brandon. Sharp, slanted strokes, like even his pen couldn't wait to be done with me. The letter was short, but it told me everything I needed to know. Inside, just one sentence: I know what you did, and this isn't over. I read it once, twice, 3 times. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly the kind of arrogance I expected from him. No, I miss you. No, where are you? Just a warning, a threat. I folded the paper neatly and slid it into my growing folder of evidence. By then, I'd been gone almost 3 weeks. In that time, Brandon had launched what looked like a public crusade. He went on local news, begging for answers, his voice trembling with fake concern. He played the grieving, heartbroken son searching for his vulnerable mother to the public. It was touching to me, it was chilling, and then, just as I feared, he made his move. A letter arrived, official, certified, from the county courthouse in Dayton. My hands shook as I signed for it, then tore it open at the kitchen table. Brandon had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incapacitated. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The packet included sworn statements from 2 people, a former neighbor and one of Brandon's old college friends, someone I barely knew. Both claimed I'd shown erratic and confused behavior over the past year. His lawyer had even submitted old voicemail snippets, clipped and edited, until they sounded like the ramblings of someone unstable. And the final blow, a letter from a psychiatrist I had never met, diagnosing me with paranoia and warning the court that my disappearance was proof of mental decline. The goal was clear: freeze my accounts, seize the trust, drag me back under his control. It felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. That night, Aaron came over. He read the documents silently, his face unreadable. When he finally looked up, he said just one thing: we've got work to do, but Margaret, you need to stay calm, stay sharp. Panic is what they're counting on. So I did. The next days passed like a storm. Aaron brought in an experienced litigator. We pulled together documents, digital records, daily journals. We even scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Lavini, a kind woman with clear eyes and sharper instincts, came to the house. She spent 3 hours with me, asking about my childhood, my late husband, Brandon. I told her everything. She didn't pity me. She didn't patronize me. She listened. And when she stood to leave, she squeezed my hand and said softly, "You're the most lucid person I've seen this week." It felt like my first real breath in days. But the pressure didn't stop. News of the hearing leaked. The same internet that had once rallied behind Brandon's missing mother campaign began to shift. Why hadn't I contacted anyone? Was I unstable? Was someone manipulating me? Brandon knew how to feed the narrative. But I wasn't afraid anymore because now I had more than proof. I had purpose. Late at night in the quiet of that little house, I sat in front of a camera and recorded a statement, not for the public yet, but ready just in case they tried to silence me. My name is Margaret Taylor. I am of sound mind. And I was betrayed by the person I trusted most. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just told the truth. Because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wasn't the one on trial. The courthouse in Dayton hadn't changed since the last time I was there years ago, when I paid a parking ticket and sat in a room full of people, just hoping to move on from their mistakes. But this time, I wasn't just another face in the crowd. I was the accused. Aaron told me to dress simple but strong, not to beg, to be heard. So I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, my husband's old watch, and a pair of sensible heels that clicked defiantly across the courthouse floor. Brandon was already at the front when I entered. He stood as if out of respect, a mask of concern painted across his face. To anyone else, it might have looked like warmth. To me, it was a weapon. He was here to bury me. The judge, an older man with weary eyes, opened the case in the matter of Margaret Taylor's mental competency. The words clung to the air like smoke. Brandon's attorney went first, a tall man with a polished voice, too smooth to trust. He laid it out like a script. Margaret had disappeared. Margaret was behaving erratically. Margaret was unstable, vulnerable, possibly manipulated. He introduced the psychiatrist's letter, the one from the stranger who had never spoken to me. Then he played the audio clips, my own voice, twisted and spliced until it sounded like the unraveling of a woman on the edge. I sat stiff in my chair as the judge's eyebrows rose, my hands gripping the armrest so tight they ached. And then Brandon spoke. Your Honor, he said, voice trembling in just the right places. I love my mother. I really do. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of, Brandon said, his voice trembling just enough to sell the act. She's not herself. She's lost. That was my moment. I stood slowly. My turn, Your Honor. The judge gave a slight nod. I walked to the stand with measured steps, letting the silence stretch, letting every click of my heels echo through the courtroom. Then I spoke. My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 62 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I am not lost, and I am certainly not anyone's victim deliberately. I opened my folder and handed the judge a certified psychiatric report. From Dr. Lavini, signed, dated, sealed. Her conclusion was clear, completely sound mind. No signs of decline, emotionally stable. I caught it then, the subtle tightening of Brandon's attorney's shoulders, the twitch in Brandon's jaw. But I wasn't finished. I also have here, I said, raising a second folder, a full log of every phone call I made the week before I left. Receipts for every transfer of funds into my trust, clean medical records, and a sworn affidavit from the attorney who helped me exit the facility stating I was lucid, logical, and fully in control of my decisions. Then I paused, leaning just slightly forward. And I also have something else. But I won't be presenting it today, not unless I need to. I didn't open the file. The one that held every forged loan, every stolen signature, every fraudulent document Brandon had touched. That was my ace. Instead, I turned back to the judge. He put me in a facility without my consent. He took my phone, took my freedom, and now he wants to take what little I have left, my voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Aaron sat beside me, calm but steady, his eyes locked on mine. Not surprised, proud. The judge leaned back, tapping his thumb against the file. I need time to review all documents and the medical evaluation. The court will reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. As the session closed, Brandon turned toward me. His fists clenched, his jaw tight, but I refused to meet his eyes. His mask was cracking, and I walked out with my head held high. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I could win it. 2 weeks, that's how long the judge gave us. Brandon didn't waste a single hour. That same evening, the local news ran a fresh segment. Missing mother reappears in court. Son fears exploitation. I sat in my living room, arms folded, watching as Brandon's eyes glistened for the cameras. His voice quivered just enough. I just want to make sure my mother is safe. She's been through so much. She's not thinking clearly. I'm afraid there are people around her with bad intentions. Bad intentions. There were no people around me, no manipulators, just me. Just Margaret Taylor, the woman who raised him, the woman who sacrificed, the woman who forgave more times than a mother should. And yet, he painted me as a puppet. That was the moment I knew. The silent war I'd been fighting in my heart was no longer enough. It was time to strike back. I called Aaron when he arrived. I handed him a sealed envelope, the one I'd been guarding like a lifeline. Inside, every forged loan, every manipulated tax return, every fraudulent signature Brandon had left behind. Send it, I told him. Not to the court, to the Department of Justice. Anonymously, he flipped through the pages, his expression tightening. This will get their attention. I'm counting on it. But I wasn't finished. That same night, under one of my new aliases, I transferred $5 million to a national nonprofit that protects the elderly from financial exploitation. No names, no fingerprints, just the money. Within a week, they launched a campaign using my case as a rallying cry. They didn't mention me directly, but the timing was undeniable. And suddenly, the whispers began. How does a mother vanish, only to reappear in court while her son tries to lock her away? Something's not right with him. Let her speak. I don't trust him. Brandon's perfect image began to buckle. Then came the break I hadn't expected. A journalist from a major paper contacted Erin. She wanted to hear my side. She promised no names, no photos, just truth. I agreed. We met in a quiet cafe 2 towns over. I wore a hat, sunglasses, and sat in the back corner. She set a recorder down and simply said, "Tell me." So I did. I told her about the facility, about the day Brandon dropped me there, stripped me of my phone, my freedom, my dignity. I didn't mention the lottery. Not yet. When she asked about the court case, I gave her the truth in one sentence. He's trying to take control of my life. 2 days later, the headline hit the front page. Mother or millionaire? The silencing of Margaret T. It didn't take long before the dots began to connect. Online chatter grew louder. Speculation mounted. Was the missing mother also the anonymous donor? Was this why her son wanted her declared incompetent? And still I remained silent, because I knew Brandon's downfall wouldn't come from an accusation. It would come from a reckoning. 2 days before the court was set to reconvene, Erin got the call. "I know what you did, and this isn't over." I read it once, twice, a third time. Then I laughed, not out of humor, but because it was exactly the kind of arrogance I expected from him. "No, I miss you. No, where are you? Just a warning, just a threat." I folded the letter neatly and slid it into my growing folder of evidence. By then, I had been gone nearly 3 weeks. Brandon had already launched his campaign of concerned television interviews, news segments, crocodile tears for the cameras. He played the grieving son searching for his confused, vulnerable mother. It would have been comical if it wasn't so chilling. And then the real strike came. A certified letter arrived from the county courthouse in Dayton. I signed for it with trembling hands, then sat at the kitchen table to open it. Brandon had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I couldn't breathe. Inside were statements from 2 so-called witnesses, one a former neighbor, the other an old college friend of his I barely knew, claiming I'd shown signs of confusion and erratic behavior. His lawyer had even submitted audio clips, chopped and spliced voicemails of mine that made me sound scattered, unstable. He attached a psychiatrist's letter to someone I'd never met, claiming concern for my paranoid behavior. They wanted the court to freeze my accounts, to seize the trust, to drag me back. The air left my lungs. That night, Erin came over. He read the entire petition, his expression carved in stone. Finally, he set the papers down. "We've got work to do," he said. "But Margaret, you need to stay calm, stay sharp. They're counting on panic." I nodded, numb but determined. The days blurred like a storm. Erin brought in a litigator, and together we gathered everything: phone records, bank logs, receipts, daily journals. We scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Lavini arrived at the house. She stayed 3 hours, asking about my childhood, Richard, Brandon. She didn't pity me. She listened. She pressed where it hurt. She measured every word. When she left, she touched my hand. "You're the most lucid person I've seen this week," she said softly. It was the first real breath I'd taken in days. Still, the pressure built. News of the hearing leaked. The same media that had played Brandon's grieving act now turned the story into a spectacle. Why hasn't she spoken? Is she unstable? Is someone else pulling the strings? The world loves a mystery. Brandon fed them one, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had proof. I had purpose. In the quiet of my little house, I set up a camera. I didn't publish the recording, not yet, but I wanted it ready. I stared into the lens and said, "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am of sound mind. I was betrayed by the person I trusted most." No tears, no screaming, just the truth, because I knew what was coming, and this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. The courthouse looked exactly the same as the last time I'd been there years ago, when I'd paid a parking ticket and sat beside strangers hoping to leave their mistakes behind. Back then, I was a wife, a mother, a believer in second chances. Now, I was the accused. Erin told me to dress simple but strong. Something that said, "I'm not here to beg, I'm here to be heard." I wore a navy coat with silver buttons, Richard's old watch, and sensible heels that clicked defiantly against the courthouse floor. Brandon was already seated when I entered. He rose as if in some perfect performance, that same mask of concern plastered across his face. To the crowd, it looked warm. To me, it was a knife. He was here to bury me. The judge called the case in the matter of Margaret Taylor's mental competency. Brandon's attorney went first. A polished man with a voice like silk, he laid out their script. Margaret was missing. Margaret was erratic. Margaret was being manipulated. Margaret was a danger to herself. He introduced the fake psychiatrist's letter, the chopped voicemails, all the poisoned fragments. I listened to my own voice sound frantic, unstable, stripped of context. The judge's eyebrows lifted. My hands gripped the chair. Then Brandon spoke. His voice trembled with rehearsed sincerity. Your Honor, I love my mother. I really do. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of. She's not herself. She's lost. That was my cue. I rose slowly. My turn, Your Honor. The judge nodded. I walked to the stand, set down my folder, and let the silence settle. My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 62 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I am not lost. And I am not anyone's victim. I handed the judge Dr. Lavigne's report signed, dated, airtight, completely sound, no decline. Emotionally stable, Brandon's attorney shifted. In his seat, Brandon's jaw tightened. I opened my second folder. Here are phone logs, trust transfers, clean medical records, and a sworn affidavit from the attorney who escorted me out of the facility stating I was lucid, logical, and in control. I paused. And I also have something else, but I won't present it today, not unless I need to. That file, the one with every fraud, every forged signature, remained hidden, my ace. Instead, I turned to the judge. He locked me in a facility without my consent. He took my phone, my freedom, and now he wants my voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him. The courtroom froze. Aaron sat steady at my side. The judge tapped the file. Mrs. Taylor, he said at last, based on the overwhelming evidence, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in the petitioner's claims, this court dismisses the case. Your autonomy and financial control are fully restored. You are competent and independent. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled as I gathered my papers and walked out. Brandon said nothing as I passed. His eyes were wide, not with anger, but with fear, because he knew this battle was over. But the war. You know what surprised me most? I didn't cry, not this time. That night, the interview aired. Millions watched. Messages poured in, people from all over the country sharing their own stories of betrayal, abandonment, and survival. Suddenly, I wasn't just Margaret anymore. I was a mirror for everyone who had been silenced. Brandon didn't speak publicly, but sources whispered he was devastated, that his carefully built life was crumbling. Good, he built it on manipulation, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't gloat. Instead, I got to work. I began planning a foundation that would truly protect elders from legal and financial abuse. Real lawyers, real funding, real advocacy. I called it the Margaret Project. If they were going to use my name to strip me of dignity, then I was going to use it to give dignity back. Still, the pain lingered, not because Brandon was suffering, but because once I had loved him with a loyalty that blinded me. Now, I had to learn to live without that illusion. But I had something better now, the truth. And no one could take that from me again. Brandon's arrest didn't come with sirens. It came with headlines. Brandon Taylor indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read it on a quiet morning, tea in hand. My cat curled beside me. The house was still, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the shutters. For a long time, I just stared at the article, not because I didn't believe it, I did, but because I had imagined this moment so many times that when it finally came, it felt like déjà vu. Of course, he was out on bond. Money can buy time, even when it can't buy peace. But the damage was done. His name was now synonymous with betrayal. Clients gone, credit lines frozen, friends vanished, even his wife filed for divorce. He was alone. I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Because betrayal doesn't leave you whole, it makes you sharper, wiser, stronger. But something soft dies in you. That blind trust, that belief that love is enough. And I didn't mourn that softness. I buried it. It was a chilly Saturday when I walked into the town center for the first time since the interview. People recognized me, but they didn't whisper, they smiled. A woman in her 40s touched my arm and said, "You gave my mom courage to leave a bad situation." At the pharmacy, a young clerk slipped a note into my prescription bag. "My grandma says thank you." I hadn't sought this attention, but it came gently, like sunlight through heavy clouds. That afternoon, Aaron stopped by. They offered him a deal, he said. 10 years if he pleads guilty. If not, it goes to trial. And I asked, he thinks he can outsmart the system? I shook my head. He's been pretending his whole life. Aaron hesitated. He still hasn't tried to contact you? I didn't answer, not directly, because I had received something, a letter, unmarked envelope, slid under my front door one evening while I was in the kitchen. Inside was a photograph from my 60th birthday, me, in a yellow sweater, laughing. With cake on my face, Brandon beside me, holding the knife, laughing too, on the back. One sentence in his handwriting, "You always believed in me." I'm sorry that wasn't enough. I sat with that photo for hours, not crying, not raging, just remembering the boy who begged for one more bedtime story. The teenager who crashed my car and cried when I didn't yell. The man who hugged me tighter than usual the day his father died. I loved all those versions of him. But true love demands truth, and Brandon chose lies that night. I burned the photo in the fireplace, not out of hate, but out of release. I didn't need a picture to remember, I needed peace. And I was almost there. The morning I returned to Willow Pines, the sky was pale gray, the kind that softens the world without hiding it. I stood outside for a long moment, staring at the very place where I'd once been left like luggage. The doors opened and Ruby stepped out before I could knock. Her gasp turned into tears. "Oh my God, Margaret," I smiled. "It's me." We hugged, not politely, not briefly. We hugged like two people who had survived something. Her arms were warm, and I realized how long it had been since I'd felt safe in someone's embrace. Inside, everything looked different. Freshly waxed floors, brighter lights, the common room with new books, a better television, and real coffee brewing. "I heard what you did," Ruby said, leading me to a bench. "The donations, the interviews, Margaret, you changed everything." "No," I said softly. "I just stopped letting people decide who I was." We walked the halls together. I even visited Doris's old room. When I walked into what used to be Doris's old room, I froze. It was no longer the same. It was a reading lounge now. The staff looked up, some smiling, some stunned. A few residents recognized me. I nodded back. They weren't invisible anymore. And neither was I that afternoon. I gave a speech in the new activities room. Folding chairs lined the floor. Cookies sat on a table. Ruby introduced me like I was someone famous, but I shook my head. "I'm not here because I'm rich," I began. "And I'm not here because I was wronged. I'm here because I was silenced. And I know how many of you still feel that way." Every eye was locked on me, some brimming with tears. "I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago," I said softly. "You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you are not finished." The applause started gently, then grew stronger, fuller. I smiled, and for the first time, the weight of every lonely night I had carried was replaced with something warmer, something whole. When I returned home, I finalized the trust. The Margaret Project would no longer just be an idea, it would be a national organization. Legal and financial advocacy for elders in danger of being exploited, attorneys, hotlines, partnerships with senior care facilities and courts, real protection, real voices. As for Brandon, he took the deal. 10 years, he tried sending another letter. If I returned it unopened, that chapter was closed. I spent the final days of the year writing letters to everyone who had stood by me, Aaron, Ruby, even Dr. Lavini. I didn't thank them for saving me. I thanked them for standing beside me while I saved myself. And then, on the first snow of January, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote a letter to myself, just one page. I sat by the fireplace, the cat curled at my feet, and read it aloud. "Dear Margaret, you weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were a woman who loved too deeply. And when they tried to write you out of your own life, you picked up the pen and wrote the ending yourself. I am so proud of you. With love, yourself." I folded the letter, slipped it into a small wooden box, and set it on the mantel. I didn't need a legacy of money, or revenge, or even justice. I had something greater. Freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was finally fully, completely free. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. Battle was over, but the war was just beginning.